It is working. As the comedian says, is this thing on? So, good afternoon. It is great to see everybody. I want to welcome our presenters, our committee members, and thanks to the public. We have at least one senator that's going to be Zooming in. I think Senator Kemp is going to be Zooming in momentarily, and Senator Dixon may be able to join us. I know he had a scheduling conflict. I'm John Kennedy. I have the pleasure of serving as the chair of this special study committee regarding absenteeism. And it is my pleasure to get to serve with people that really care about this issue and many other issues. But as I've said before, everyone on this committee asks to serve. They have a sincere interest, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves now. To my left.
I'm sorry. Good afternoon, State Senator Freddie Powell Sims from District 12. I represent 13 counties in Southwest Georgia. Glad to be with you.
Thank you. And I'm State Senator Billy Hickman, Senate District 4. I represent Evans County, Candler County, Bullock County, Effingham County, and about 70,000 people in the Chatham County area. Thank you.
Hey, y'all, I'm Sean Still. I represent North Fulton, South Forsyth, and Gwinnett. And so between those three counties, we are the first, fourth, and fifth largest school districts in the state.
All right. Wow. Thank you all for being here. You know, it's been a real busy summer, and fall is a busy time also, and it's certainly turning out to be that way for our study committee, but we want to learn a lot about this issue. We're going to continue to dig into what the root causes of chronic absenteeism are in our schools. Let me give just a little recap, maybe for those that didn't see the first two, and I'm going to try to do this very briefly, but in our first meeting that we had, we built a strong foundation by defining the problem and understanding it, hopefully, and understanding some data and the data points behind chronic absenteeism. We heard from Attendance Works, which is a national nonprofit leading work across the country on this issue. We heard from CSG South, who shared valuable regional data and solutions. We heard from Dr. Gary McKimmedy, who presented findings from the Student Attendance Subcommittee. We heard from Justin Hill from the Department of Education, providing a statewide perspective on this issue. And finally, we heard from Dr. Dan Sims, the superintendent of Macon-Bibb Schools, one of the counties I have the privilege of representing, and I know Dr. Sims, who helped us see what absenteeism really looks like on the ground. Then we had our second meeting, and we took things really one step further, exploring the barriers and the root causes of chronic absenteeism. We heard from several people at our second meeting. We heard from Judge Ann Harris and Judge Wayne Granis, who discussed the school climate committees, which if you've read the bill, you know that the structure that we put absentee under school climate committee, something that was created, I think, in 2005 by the legislature at that time. We heard from MJ Kim and Fran Dundor from the Governor's Office of Student Achievement, who talked about the governor's vision and some data. We heard from Christy Doyle from the Georgia Apex, who highlighted the daily challenges that schools face and students in school. We heard from Darlene Lynch of the Georgia Appleseed, who spoke about how suspensions and enrollment policies really do impact attendance, as you would expect. Melanie Bates and Lynn Meadows with the Georgia School Nurse Association came and talked to us about the critical role from their perspective and their experience of what a nurse on site at the school can mean in helping students, A, stay engaged, B, feel like that they have a safe space there, and C, sort of have a little bit of an escape hatch when things don't go so well, of having that immediate access to some medical care. And finally, Kwame Johnson Sr. and Pierre Gaither, Big Brothers, Big Sisters of Metro Atlanta, showed us how mentorship can really, really transform the outcomes of struggling students. So each of these conversations, I think, has certainly helped me, and I think our committee better understand this complex web of circumstances that lead to why a particular child has an absenteeism problem. So today we're going to turn our focus to truancy. As the conversations around chronic absence and absenteeism gain traction, quite frankly, across the country, these two terms, chronic absenteeism and truancy, are sometimes used interchangeably, but they're not the same thing. Quite frankly, something I learned in preparing some work for this committee, and understanding this distinction between the two is critical. Chronic absenteeism looks at the total number of days that a student misses school, whether those absences are excused or not. and focuses on addressing the root causes of what is keeping the child from coming to class. Truancy, on the other hand, refers to specifically to unexcused absences, when students are missing school without a valid reason. In Georgia, truancy is often defined as more than 5 unexcused absences during a school year. And it's often viewed through the lens of compliance and accountability, sometimes involving administrators or even courts when necessary. So today, I'm excited to hear from the folks we're going to hear from. We've got a great group of people that are going to share their experience and their expertise. We're going to hear directly from those that, quite frankly, are on the front lines of this issue, and the people who see the realities of truancy and intervention every single day. We've got 5 speakers lined up. We're going to begin with Judge Render Hurd. Judge Hurd is a juvenile court judge in the Tifton Judicial Circuit, bringing valuable insight from the rural perspective. But I, fortunately, as a point of personal privilege, I have known Judge Hurd for many, many years. We have worked on various issues at the state bar level and other areas. He is incredibly respected and loved by his community because people know he has a servant's heart, and he puts his job at the top of his priority, and his job are dealing with juveniles, and he does a great job with it. And Judge Hurd, I appreciate you sharing your time and your experience. And if you would, come on forward. And if you'll just sit right there, please, in the middle, I'll turn your microphone on, and appreciate you traveling to be with us. And with that, Judge, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman and distinguished members of this committee, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I am Render Hurd, and I am the judge at the juvenile courts in Tift, Turner, Worth, and Irwin counties, south central Georgia. We do a lot of work in the chins and or truancy area. And so I wanted to come and tell you guys a little bit about what we do. I believe that the juvenile court judges of this state are the experts when it comes to the legal aspect of truancy and what we call chins. I'll explain that in just a second. But if we aren't, we certainly ought to be. Okay. And so part of our job, as we see it as juvenile court judges, is to let you guys and inform you guys sort of where we sit with the law these days, and how it's impacting us on the ground, sort of boots on the ground kind of thing. So I've got a PowerPoint presentation. There's a number of slides that I'm going to speed through. The reason is I put them in there for you guys for educational purposes. So y'all would have them at your fingertips if you had any questions about the basics of chins and how we address truancy. I'll slow down halfway through it to talk a little bit more about what it looks like in Tift County and Tift, Turner, Worth, and Irwin with regard to how we are handling and trying to combat absenteeism and truancy in our area. Our first slide is just the definition of a child in need of services. A child in need of services, as you see, can be a number of things. The most common reasons that a child is adjudicated to be a child in need of services are runaway, truancy, and what used to be called unruly. We don't call it that anymore, but ungovernable, and habitually disobedient to the lawful commands of their parent or guardian, as the code would say. But the one we're here about today, and the one we probably deal the most with, is truancy. Runaway is a close second, but we do more there's a more robust program around truancy than any other CHINS program. And a CHINS kid, you can think the dependency kids are the kids who are dealing with defects, all right? And then the delinquent kids are the kids that we have criminal issues with, delinquent acts. CHINS kids sort of fall in the middle. Okay, they haven't committed any crimes as what we would call crimes, and yet they aren't necessarily dependent yet either. So they're sort of in the middle. That's a good way to think about it. The Truant, and this is one of the issues we have, and Senator Kennedy mentioned truant being 5. That's the state school board policy, all right, which is a different definition than the code is, all right? And so the code is actually 10 days of unexcused absences during any academic year, all right? And so the child has to be subject to compulsory school attendance. That means not 16 years of age or older, and or being homeschooled properly. We'll talk about that a little bit as well. But truant means having 10 or more days of unexcused absences. I'm going to skip this slide here just for time purposes. Y'all can read it, why we treat kids who are chins that are a little bit differently. I'm also going to put this in there for you guys, but I'm going to skip through this. This is sort of the progression of a CHINS case, and there's some facts in there about who can file a CHINS case. The thing in the complaint that's different is if a school official files a complaint rather than the DA's office or some private citizen, then they have to have jumped through some hoops prior to filing that complaint, all right? And they have to have made efforts to keep from trying to file a complaint before they do that. And that's that slide, and y'all can read that later. The petition, one of the things in juvenile court that we deal with is a sped up adjudication process. Juvenile court acts fast, okay, compared to the rest of the legal community, all right? And it's because the amount of days that we're dealing with is such a large percentage of a child's life at that point in their life. And so we are speeding things along where criminal cases and other things may drag out 6, 18 months or, you know, that type of things. We are from filing to hearing many times, certainly within 30 and within 60, but sometimes even within 30 days. We go from filing of a case to the case being adjudicated or tried. And so we are moving along at breakneck speed in those. Anyone can file a petition. Most of the time it is done by the DA's office these days. Originally, the Prosecuting Attorney's Council took the position that it was not the DA's job to do that. Matter of fact, there was some question about whether they had prosecutorial immunity when they did that. So statute was changed several years ago to make sure that we were aware that the DA's office can file that. And that's who in our circuit most of the time does it. Disposition then so we don't call what we do at the end of a case, a sentencing, okay? But in a delinquency case, this is sort of would be like the sentencing side of it, what we can do. It's the disposition hearing. We don't use that word certainly in juvenile court, but that's sort of, you know, we adjudicate him. Have we determined them to be a child in need of services? If so, what can we do? That's this disposition hearing. We have that within 30 days of the adjudication hearing. So again, at rapid speed, most of the time, I would say 90% of our cases, at least, the adjudication and disposition hearing are held at the same time by agreement of all the parties. This is one thing that is important here, the disposition. What can we do as juvenile court judges? I have determined that a child has missed more than 10 days of unexcused absences during the current academic year. All right. How do we fix that? All right. That's the next question we ask. What kind of services do we need to put into place in order to do that? And that's what we determine at this disposition stage. These are what the code says. Sorry for the print. I had to get them all on one slide. But these are the things that we are allowed to do as a juvenile court judge in order to attempt to address the needs of a child who has been determined to be in need of services. By far, the most common one is number one, which is permit the child to remain with the parents and we issue what's called a protective order saying you must do this or you can't do this, and it is a set of instructions that we do to try to address the needs of the child with the child in the home. The two really important issues are 8 and 9, is that we can do anything with a family who has a child in need of services as we can to a child who has been declared to be dependent, all right, except for putting them in de facto care or in foster care unless there's some additional steps that we have to go through to do that. Under no circumstance can we order, as part of the disposition of a of a CHIN's child, can we issue a detention order. So we can't say you didn't go to school, so as a result of that, we're going to put you in detention. All right, so that's sort of those. After we have given a disposition order, we're required to review that order at various intervals. The first time is within the first 90 days. And so we have to have, is this working? Is it not working? Do we need to add services or too much? Whatever we're trying to talk about, we review it within 90 days and then at least once every 6 months thereafter. That's the code requirement for CHIN's disposition reviews. But we are, as long as that the CHIN's disposition orders can remain open for 2 years, and we are required to be reviewing those at those intervals during any time that the order remains in place. Enforcement of orders. What do we do? How do we enforce these orders? I say you must do X, you can't do Y, and if people don't follow the court orders, there's really two avenues for us. One is probation revocation if we have placed the child on CHIN's probation. We'll talk about it in just a second, that is a very, it's not very efficient means, it's not very effective. Most of the time we're dealing with contempt actions. And then CHIN's case, we can punish a parent for contempt of court for 20 days incarceration or $1,000 fine. For a child who has violated a court order, we can place that child in detention for up to 72 hours. Now, there's an issue with that in that, and we'll talk about that, but is that there's no real definition of what that means. Is it 72 hours per occurrence of a contempt action? Is it 72 hours per hearing? And so that is an area of the law that different judges are doing different things depending on how they interpret the code, which is somewhat ambiguous in that regard. So our program in Tift County, started a few years ago, and during the pandemic, obviously there were major issues during the pandemic with absenteeism. The Tift County school system hired a CHIN's coordinator at my request to basically marshal up all the CHIN's case and try to work with the parents to combat this absenteeism. So we started this program we call TIPS. I think that's a moniker that's used pretty much throughout the state, but a truancy intervention project. And ours is after the 5th absence, okay, that the school begins having truancy meetings with the parents. One of the things we did as a reaction to the first year was we moved those meetings off school campus. We wanted, and that was at my request, we wanted the parents to understand that this is no longer just a school issue. All right. And we actually moved them, and we got our county to move them into an office that you can oversee my courtroom from that office. And so they would use that as we're trying to keep y'all from going over there. Okay. And that was done strategically, and it worked the way we had hoped it would work, which is many of the cases they're able to resolve at the 5-day meeting. The other issue that we wanted to do it at 5 days rather than 10 days was because the school can act whenever it would like to with regard to asking parents to come meet. They can't get me involved until the 10th absence. Okay, as you can imagine, if by the time they file and, we're in 15 or 20 absences by the time it's heard, and that was problematic. So we're trying to combat the absenteeism as early as we can during the child's school year, because if you remember the definition, it's 10 absences in the current academic school year, which resets every year. Okay. And so most of the parents come after the 5th day. We do have some parents who the child misses 2 days in the first week, they'll go ahead and schedule a meeting because we've had problems with those parents previously, so they know, and we don't need to wait for 5 days. And so they're doing that. So the meeting's held off campus. That meeting is a multidisciplinary meeting. They invite, because that's not involving me, they invite DFACs, the Department of Juvenile Justice, other people who may be, they have counselors there, sometimes therapists, people, service providers who are all there to work with the parents. Okay, we got this issue. How do we fix it? That's what we ask a lot. What's the problem? How do we fix it? And so they do that first at this TIPS meeting, what they call the TIPS meetings. At the end of the TIPS meeting, they sign an attendance contract with the parents. That attendance contract is modeled after my court order. All right. We did that on purpose so that they know. I mean, basically, they tell them, hey, you can do this voluntarily or we'll take you over to court and, you're going to be court ordered to do it. So, they wanted them to get used to what the requirements were going to be if they did have to go to court. So that's the contract. Then they do follow-up TIP meetings to see, is it working? Is it not working? Are they still having truancy issues after the contract? And if so, then it gets referred to the DA's office, who will file a petition and initiate a CHINS case with me. Then again, the adjudication hearing, most often the parties stipulate, we seldom ever have a trial in a CHINS case or in a truancy case, certainly. And the reason is by the time they get to me, they missed 18 days. The question is, have you missed at least 10 days? And everybody said, yeah, we missed 10 days. Okay. And so that's generally a consent. Most of the time, the consent order is what I personally call it the do right order. It's just an order that says do right. Okay, it tells them, certain things of what that looks like. We try to educate the parents as to what an involved parent who is involved with their child's education looks like. And we order them to do that. All right. And that hopefully stresses to the child the importance of an involved parent and what that means in each situation. So that's the protective order. So those are called parent accountability orders and child accountability orders. And after that, we begin reviewing the case. It all depends on how bad the case is, what kind of issues we have, as to how often we are reviewing it. All right. Sometimes the first review will be in the first month if it looks like we're going to have a problem, because we don't want to let a long period of time go and the child continue to miss school. So we will do that at the first month. Sometimes I've made defects referrals, and so I need to give a little bit more time for the therapist or whoever to work with the child, services to be provided. So we will, so they're able to do that. I give them a little more time to do that. So failure to abide by the terms of the court may result in a rule nisi hearing and a contempt charge, which could lead either the child to detention or and the parent to incarceration ultimately. We don't, in our counties, use the criminal code, okay, to the DA's office does not file criminal cases for truancy against parents in our circuit. And the reason is because that is a very inefficient method, because by the time a criminal case gets through the system, months and months and months have gone. Then they put the parents on probation. Then they have to wait for the parents to violate the probation. Then they have to bring a probation revocation. And in the adult courts, that takes forever. So all the time the child is continuing to miss school. We are able to move at much faster pace than that. All right. So the judicial challenges that we are addressing, obviously the first one's lack of services. That's what we start with in every conversation. Y'all, that's no secret to you guys, okay? Who do I make referrals to? Is it DBHDD? Is it DFACs? How do I get those referrals into place? Those type of things. In the rural areas, that's a major issue. We don't have Kenny A, obviously in South Georgia. So there's not a lot of funding for for these things. And it's hard to marshal therapists, as many as we need. Psychological evaluations take us about 3 months to get done right now. And so those are all issues. That's the main problem. Second one is calculating absences. This has become a new phenomenon because we don't know what does an absence mean. The code doesn't actually define it. So is it some schools do it by the class period? Because one child may come late every day and miss first period, or leave early every day and miss sixth period or fourth period. And so do those count as full absences? Do they not count as full absences? Those are all questions that we're dealing with. What about kids who are online? We have a lot of kids these days who've been in trouble at school. They may be doing online schooling. What's an absence for that kid? Does it mean he didn't log in that day? Well, quite frankly, if kids get on and do their work like they should and work hard, they can probably do all of a day's work in 2 or 3 hours easily in there. So should we make them sit in front of the computer for 6 hours? So we have all these issues surrounding how to calculate absences, and there's nothing addressing tardies, and tardies is a major, major issue. Okay, because they can come. I had one parent one time we had to deal with who would bring her child to school at 10 every day, leave at 2 every day because she didn't want to have to stand in the in the car rider line. And so literally the kid went from 10 to 2 every day, and nothing they could do because he was there more than half the day. And so not considered absence. Homeschool issues. Are the parents really homeschooling, or are they not really homeschooling? Enforcement issues. This is a big deal. How do we, what happens when people just say, we're just not going to obey your order. Okay. We're just not going to obey your order. Kids, especially. All right, Judge, I don't care if you told me to go to school. I'm not going. What are you going to do? It's sooner or later, they put me in a corner where I have to hold them in contempt. The question is, do we do that? And we've got kids that aren't committing violent acts. How long do we put them in? All those things come up. So that's a major issue. Reviews and modifications take a lot of time, and you have to have people who are committed to the process in order to really make that work. And then those are some other challenges. There's some issues with the Chin's article that need to get cleared up. We have a continued custody hearing for Chin's cases, and it says we can only hold a kid in detention for 24 hours, but yet we have a continued custody hearing. So what's the continued custody hearing? It's little things like that that create issues. All right. That was a lot faster. I talked a lot. I was trying to get you guys as much information as I could. So.
Judge, thank you. That was very good, very informative, and gave us a viewpoint, a bird's eye view, I guess, onto the judicial side of the juvenile courts that we have not had before and wouldn't but for you bringing this to us. Any questions from the committee? Yes, sir. Chairman.
Well, I really was going to defer the first question to Senator Sam, but she stepped out because she's a former educator, so she would have some questions. Define excused absence versus unexcused absence for me. And then also, we got, according to the bill that Senator Kennedy introduced on this, there's about 350,000 kids and students in Georgia that are chronically absent. So how do you take your model that you put down there and move across the whole state?
Well, and it's hopefully we can do that. One of the things that it's going to require is to be able to. There are many places that have this. Matter of fact, somebody from Fulton behind me is going to talk about the Fulton version of this in just a second. But a lot of it's resources, okay, and some of it's how judges are interpreting those ambiguous portions of the code, and so it's hopefully we could get a model that had enough services, but in some of the even more rural areas, I'm on 75, so we're not. And we still got some services available. There's some places that have nothing, so it's very difficult to replicate that. In those circumstances. I forgot your first question already.
Define excused versus unexcused absence.
So and that is each school system does that differently. Although the state school board has on on their website what it defines as excused and unexcused absences. But that varies how each of the school systems are interpreting it. That's another issue. All right. One school, my wife and I used to take our kids out to go to Disney World. She had a letter that she would write to school and say, "Look at all the things where my kids are learning. You need to excuse this absence because we're learning at Epcot and those kind of things." Not an excused absence. We lost on that one. But anyway, so that is something that we really need to nail down. Although the state school board does have on their website a list of what they consider excused absences.
All right.
Thank-
Senator Still.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Judge, thanks for coming up. If this was a statewide program and your program was a model, what would be the average cost per child for the intervention all the way through the program?
I honestly cannot tell you that. Okay. And the reason is because we have a CHINS coordinator that's funded by the school system. I don't even know what that person is getting paid. Most of it is done by us who are sort of doing extra stuff because we really like this model works. Okay. If you're willing to stay and review at a rapid pace. One of my colleagues taught me something a couple of years ago, and it's one of my life's mottos now: measured things move. Okay, and I cannot stress that enough. The more often you measure these cases, the more traction we get. Okay, the problem is it takes a phenomenal amount of time in order to do that, and you have to have people who are committed and who are not overloaded with other stuff. So it's a big issue that I really can't put a number on at this point without digging out into a lot of corners, and we don't have time to go in.
Well, dollars notwithstanding, what would you say the amount of time that you spend in a given week, just on average, on this?
So let's talk about cases, okay? Because I think that's easier because some weeks we'll have hearings and some weeks we won't, okay? But one case, like I said, the adjudication part of it's easy. Everybody consents, okay? But when we're digging down and we're trying to find out, does this child have one of the issues on the obstacles slide in the end is we're trying to determine a lot whether these are behavioral issues or whether these are mental health issues. Okay. And that's very, very difficult to do at times. Okay. Because in a behavioral issue, I can push a child and, for lack of a better word, threaten a child, with sanctions if they don't get it right. If the child's got a legitimate anxiety disorder that's, we're dealing with, that becomes a whole nother issue. And in order to flesh all that out, that hearing alone may take an hour or hour and a half to get to that. And that's 1 out of 10 to plus cases a day.
Right.
All right. So it can get voluminous, when we are having to, and then some cases we come in, we give them the do right order. Everybody does right. I don't see them again for 6 months. All right. But more often than not, we're doing, and some of them we're putting on every 2 weeks for a little bit to get everything, in order because kids, you have to. There's a disparity between, and there's a socioeconomic issue, okay, with regard to how parents discipline kids now. All right. And I provided vehicles for my children. I provided phones for my children. I provided iPads for my children. Anytime they didn't do what they did at school, I just took the keys, what do you do if you're a parent and you don't provide a phone for your child? And you don't have a car for your child, and you got a 15-year-old, you're a single mother, and you have a 15-year-old boy who says, "I'm not going to school." All right. Then it becomes a little bit dicier subject. And that is something that is, is very difficult. What we're trying to do from my standpoint is I don't want to criminalize truant conduct, but at some point, okay, when a child says, "I'm not going to follow your order, Judge," we believe that it's worse on him to teach him that it's okay to not follow court orders than it is to detain him on a contempt charge. And so the question is how much is it going to take for a child to get it? All right. And sometimes that's a lot harder than others.
Judge Hurley, we've got a question, I think, from Senator Kemp, who is online. Senator Kemp, are you there? Can you hear us?
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Thank y'all so much and hate that I'm not able to be there with you all. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go
All
ahead.
right. Judge, thank you so much for your presentation and the information you shared. I think earlier in your presentation, you mentioned that the state board defines truancy the way that the chairman shared, and it's 5 days, whereas the courts recognize that it's 10 days. Is that just to kind of put kids on radar of schools, but the courts will not act until they hit 10 days? Is that kind of what the understanding is of that?
I'm completely guessing at this, but having looked at it, I think that was the school board policy prior to the statute being drafted. And when they did the statute, they felt like they needed more than 5 days. So they added the 10 days and it just never got changed. Okay. And it just never.
Got it. Okay.
So, I
All
mean,
right.
that would be my
Thanks.
guess, but and I have actually looked at it. I'm on the state's website before, and that's why I said, well, that can't be right because I mean, my code says something different, and and ask some questions about that.
Judge Hurd, thank you for being here. I appreciate it. I suspect
for the
we'd love
opportunity.
to keep hearing from you, but we've got others and we've got a hard stop at 5 o'clock. So thank you for your time and your presentation. And I'm sure we're going to be back in touch, probably asking for some more questions and guidance on this.
I'll be glad to help in any way I can.
Yes, sir.
Thank
Thank you so much. All right, Dr. Jennifer Diaz? Yes. Would you introduce yourself to the committee, and you have the floor. Thank you for
Yes,
being here.
Thank you. Yes, I am Dr. Jennifer Diaz. I am actually from Senator Still's district. But thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, senators, for having us here, and thank you for allowing school counselors to have a voice in this. School counselors do tend to be the boots on the ground in the schools. Dealing with attendance, of course, first it's your teachers, and then it's going to be your social workers and your school counselors. So I did send out a survey to our leadership team and asked from folks all over the state, what are you seeing? So I have some words from them, but I want to share just some basics about what we see as school counselors. If this will move forward, there we go. So y'all have already done a lot of research. You know about attendance. We know that chronic absenteeism causes many problems later in life. Chronic absenteeism, 10% or more days of school. If a student misses 10% or more days of school by the time they are in third grade, they are less likely to graduate from high school. They're less likely to read on grade level. We know these things. And it hurts us as school counselors to watch this happening. So we know that our figures since COVID, we have had much more attendance issues happening across the state. That is a student issue and also a parent issue in terms of perception. So we know that we want to make sure that all of our students are in school because we want to avoid those negative consequences. So why do we as school counselors see students as being absent? We know that the data tells us that number one is illness. Well, yeah, but we report it as illness because a parent writes a note. It may not be that the child was ill, but parents figure out pretty quickly. They can write a note saying my kid was sick, and then it's considered an excused absence. And I can answer your question about what our excused absence is. Of course, first is illness. If there is a death of an immediate family member, there are religious holidays. If there is a family member that is deployed, there have, I believe it's 5, it may be 9 days to visit a member that's in the military. And there are a few other things after that. There is also some levity in terms of schools have the power to say, yes, this is excused, or that, no, that is not excused. But those would be your major considered excused days from school. So, anxiety since the pandemic has skyrocketed in all age levels. I've been a school counselor for 24 years. I did 14 years in elementary school, 9 years in middle school. This is my first year in high school, and whoa, it's different. But I'm enjoying it nonetheless. But anxiety has skyrocketed in our kids, whether that is social anxiety, whether that is testing anxiety, whether that is anxiety of noises in the cafeteria. That is going up. That is one of the reasons that we see kids missing school. We also see other mental health challenges that are also on the rise in our young people. We have homelessness. Those are reasons that kids can't get to school. We know that with the McKinney-Vento movement, our McKinney-Vento legislation, when kids have to move their school because of financial reasons, they're no longer allowed to stay in their home. McKinney-Vento says those kids need to be able to stay in their home school because that's what's right. They shouldn't have to move. The problem is when they do move somewhere else, when we coordinate transportation, that takes some time, and kids are going to miss school in that amount of time. Now, what we also are able to do in Gwinnett County, we give Uber gift cards. We are able to give gift cards so that folks can get transportation for gas, so that parents, if they have transportation, can get them to school in that amount of time between when they have to move and when we have transportation coordinated. But still, that can cause problems. We know that there are family support issues, whether that is unstable housing, whether that is family responsibilities placed on youth. We have many youth that have jobs, and those jobs have to support the household. And that's unfortunate, but that is the way that it is for some families. We know that academic disengagement, whether that's disengagement on the child's part or even on the parent's part. So we have lots of parents that have just not seen school as important anymore. When COVID hit and everything went digital, now we hear parents say, well, can't they just do everything online? Well, you can do some things online, but you can't do everything online, and you don't get the instruction, and you don't get the rich learning that you get when you are in the classroom. And all of you know this, but parents seem to have lost that piece because we allowed students to do so much digital learning. So there's a academic disengagement on parents' part. Right before I left to come to this committee, I had a student come into my office, and he was asking about a credit recovery assignment he has to do because he is in credit recovery because he's failed some of his high school classes. Why has he failed high school classes? Because he wasn't coming to school. And I said, oh my goodness, I am going to talk to state senators about you. And he kind of smiled. I said, because you're coming to school now. I said, so, what can I tell them? What's making a difference for you right now? And he honestly said, he said, well, I just know I need to graduate. So for him, the motivation of, oh, it's important, I see that I really do need to graduate, that's giving him that motivation. But at some point prior to this year, he really had lost a lot of that motivation and didn't see why it was important for him. Now he's starting to see a little bit more of that. So school climate, there are bullying issues, but the word bullying is overused. Bullying is something that is chronic, it is repeated, it is intentional, it's power-based. Kids will go home, they will tell their parents that someone was mean to them in school. Parents will call the school the next day and say, my kid's being bullied, why isn't the school doing something about it? And really what it is very normal, developmentally appropriate conflict issues, but the parents are only listening to one side. And so kids will say, I'm staying home, or a parent will say, I'm not sending my kid to school until you figure out and you deal with whatever this issue is. That makes it very challenging because it may not be a bullying issue. If it's bullying and we're able to say, yes, this is bullying, we act on that and we do something about it. But sometimes it's just not. So the perceived lack of belonging is also a really big deal for our students. Again, when we all went home and we were digital, a lot of kids got drowned in their devices. That is more so even today. And so they belong on their phones, but when they're in school, they don't talk to one another, right? We have kids that know students from all of the schools around them, but when they're in person, they don't talk. My daughter and I were in line at Chick-fil-A, and we were ordering dinner one night, and as we passed the fella that took our order, she said, Mom, I know him. I said, what do you mean you know him? He doesn't go to our school because we weren't in our district. She said, no, I know him on Snapchat. I said, well, why didn't you say hi? She said, well, that would be weird. So kids don't necessarily feel like they belong together, and we are really, really combating the effects of social media. So those are some of the things that our school counselors are saying. Why are kids absent? And what do we know as school counselors? All right. How do school counselors support attendance? Well, we do all sorts of things. I believe that every single thing that we do every day supports school attendance. But of course, talking about academic planning and course selection, that's among high schoolers, right? We're not necessarily talking about course selection for second graders. They're just going to go on to the third grade next year. But we do have lots and lots of talks with students about goal setting and what do you want to do this year? And how do you want to accomplish that? And certainly when it gets into high school, we're talking about what classes are you going to take? What pathway do you want to have once you graduate high school? Where do you think you're going to go after you graduate high school? We do college and career ready lists. If you are aware of the Bridge Law, we have Bridge Law activities that start in grade K all the way up to grade 12. So those are going to be things like assessment about your learning style, about your top skills. What kinds of aptitudes do you have? What do you like to do? What are you interested in, right? When we do those assessments, and then we can have discussions with students afterwards about, well, it seems like maybe engineering might be a pathway for you. Have you thought about that? Well, no, I haven't thought about that. Well, here are some jobs that you might be interested interested in. And then it's kind of like there's a click, they get it, and they say, oh, okay, I really want to learn this. That's why it's important for me to go to school. We have lots and lots of teacher and parent consultation. We are calling students' parents when students are absent. The most counties will have an attendance policy, and teachers in most counties, after a student has been absent for 2 days, the teacher is supposed to call home because we know that relationships work, right? If it gets elevated to the school counselor or the school social worker right away, the parents are going to be alerted, like, why is this person calling me? So it really comes from the teachers first. Then it might go to the school counselor, and we might reach out and call and say, hey, so, I was talking with your child's teacher, and it seems like little Johnny's been out a lot, and we're kind of worried because, he's missing instruction and his friends miss him. Can you talk to us a little bit about what's going on? Having those conversations and just starting and trying to be a partner with the parents, not a punitive, not I'm calling, it's not a gotcha. It's a, hey, what's going on? Is there something that we can help with, right? Talking with lots of teachers about making sure that they're not being punitive for students. Maybe there is a valid reason that they were out. And so students don't need to be made to feel that they did something wrong for being absent. We do lots and lots of assessments. We do mental well-being assessments. We do lots of college and career assessments, getting some data and learning about our students. Level 2 and level 1 and 2, we talk about multi-tiered systems of support, and I'm sure y'all have heard about that. PBIS is a multi-tiered systems of support. Level 1 or tier 1 is things that everybody gets. So any lessons that we do on study skills, any lessons that we do on goal setting, any lessons that we do about career planning, those are level 1 supports. Those are tier 1 supports. We've got level 2 supports, maybe that's small group supports, where if we notice that students are failing, we're going to pull some kids together. If we notice some students that are having some conflict issues, we might have conflict small groups. We might have other groups talking about resilience skills. So lots and lots of small group support for students. So again, classroom lessons, individual and small group, and then designing, implementing, coordinating school-wide efforts that will support school climate. At my recent middle school, we had a No Place for Hate week. We had a college and career awareness week. We had a kindness challenge week. All of these things are activities that all students get to participate in. The teachers are supporting that in the classroom. We usually have some kind of activity in the cafeteria that the kids get to be a part of. And so it just makes it a discussion among the community of the school. We're sending out information to parents. Maybe we have a parent night about those types of things. And usually those are things that school counselors are going to support and coordinate. Of course, we've got crisis response and referral to community support. So if a student or a family is saying that they have needs, we're going to refer them to something outside of the school. Luckily, with Apex and with other in-school or school-based behavioral health folks that are coming into the schools, we might be able to have somebody in the school, but unfortunately not every school has that. So then we are trying to refer out into the community, and sometimes there aren't enough, as it's already been stated, we don't have enough support services in the communities for students. There just are not enough child therapists out there for us to send all of our students to. Staffing and ratios, I would be kicked out of Georgia School Counselor Association if I didn't mention our ratios. The national recommendation is 1 to 250. So you should have 250 kids on your caseload. That makes it reasonable that you can get to know all of those kids in the school year and do some type of activity with each and every one of them. Most school counselors have much larger caseloads than that. The guideline for Georgia is 1 to 450, and we are very grateful that we're 1 to 450 because many states are worse than that. So we don't want to say that we're not grateful. We definitely are. But it's still very, very challenging to be able to catch all of the kids that are having issues when you have a very, very large caseload. The national average is 376 to 1. So again, I would get kicked out if I didn't make sure I mentioned that we appreciate the support, but man, we could use some more boots on the ground too. So suggested solutions, we don't always want to talk about, what's wrong, but we know the research about attendance says that we don't want it to be punitive. Like Judge Hurd said several times, we want it to be something where we're joining with the families and we are asking them, what's going on with your family, not what's wrong with you or what's wrong with your family? What's happening? How can we help? How can we really partner with you? So we're talking about using data to find those targeted areas, to find those subgroups of students that really need help. We're talking about making sure that we are looking for the community supports and having a nice list of what community supports are out there so that we can refer them to. We're also talking about school climate issues. PBIS is wonderful. I was a PBIS coach for 7 years at my school. I love all of the ideas behind PBIS. It is backed by research, but I will tell you that the boots on the ground folks would like a little bit more support there too. When we come up with wonderful creative interventions, that means that we need more staff to be able to put that into place. And if we're coming up with ideas for students to participate, we might need more financial support to make sure that we're able to do all of these wonderful celebration ideas for students. So that is my presentation for now. I could talk about attendance for a very long time. What kinds of questions do you have for me?
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yeah, Chairman Hickman.
Well, I have more of a statement question, and you hit on the counselor thing, and that's something we've talked about now for years because all that's built into the QBE formula that was in place in 83 or 85 or whatever.
Yes.
And I tell people all the time, when I was in school, my counselor told me I needed to take trigonometry after geometry, and now so many counselors are having to deal with, daddy beat up mama last night. We had to spend the night in the parking lot at Walmart type deal. So, we keep talking about that. We keep bringing it up, but nobody's addressing the QB formula. Nobody's looking at poverty levels of QB formula. Nobody's paying attention to that, but we keep talking about it.
Right.
And so that's my comment.
Yeah. And
So-
I'm going to say you probably had a guidance counselor and not a school counselor. And there's a difference in the training and there's a difference in what we do. Yeah.
Senator Still.
Thank you, Chairman. Hi,
Hi.
thanks for coming.
Yeah. Thanks. Good to see you.
You touched on distraction devices.
Mhm.
So we had a little controversial bill this year
Mhm.
that prevents devices through middle school. The bill author on that said that he wanted to go all the way through 12th grade, but that
Mhm.
there weren't the votes in the House to do so.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on that? And what are your thoughts on us trying to get that across the finish line?
Well, okay. If you're asking me personally,
Yes.
Dr. Jennifer Diaz, I think that we should absolutely ban social media and ban devices for students. It is a distraction. It makes it very difficult for them to learn. If we could ban social media up until age 16, that would prevent many of the mental health issues that we're seeing among young people right now. They are spending way too much time. And parents try to be their friend and allow them to have it because of the fear of missing out, but their brains, their prefrontal cortexes are not prepared for it and they can't handle it. And they don't know what to do and how to handle the pressure when they're sitting at home and they're looking at a device and they're seeing that somebody has said something negative about them. Their world crashes. And for us, we know, just ignore them. They can't. And where they are developmentally, especially in middle school, they can't turn that off. Their brain is just focused on how do I belong with these people that are my age? And that's what they're trying to do at that age.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Senator Sims.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for joining us today and helping us with this. If you go back to your listing of reasons for absences,
Mhm.
how would you prioritize your list? What would be the number one? That was the where you said, why are students absent from a school counselor perspective?
Yes.
What would be your number one reason, your choice?
So my choice would have to be illness. Yes, kids are sick. Kids stay home, they're sick. And when they are sick, we don't want them to come to school. we don't want their germs. So yes, but the next one would be anxiety. The next one would be mental health challenges. I don't know if the next one would be homelessness, but homelessness and family support issues, probably neck and neck, academic disengagement, and then school climate issues.
I asked because a few weeks ago when we had the meeting,
Mm-hmm.
school climate really stuck with me.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about that. And I think that's really who's at the helm of the school, who's in charge, the leadership,
Mm-hmm.
how the climate, is it warm? Is it fuzzy? Is it
Right.
cold and sterile?
Mm-hmm.
Those were that's what I wanted to know. So you wouldn't, maybe your school is different then.
Well, I have been in many different schools.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's, leadership definitely has something to do with it because the way that the leader is behaving
Yeah.
in the building is going to affect the way that all of the staff are behaving, and that's going to affect how they're going to work with the students.
Yeah.
But as a school counselor, when I think of school climate, it is about like how do the kids feel welcome? Do the parents feel welcome coming in? Every school building should feel welcome for people to come in because that school is for everyone in the community. And that's a challenging thing these days. We have now in Gwinnett County schools, we are getting all of our weapons detector systems, which 5 years ago, I would have said, oh, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want our school to look that way. Now we need to be safe. We have to be safe. But it's about, how is everyone interacting in the building? Does PBIS help? Yes. But if PBIS isn't done with fidelity, is it going to help? Nope, it's not. So, it's about as much as we can focus on building positive relationships with kids and building positive relationships with their parents, then things can get better.
One last statement. On the way up, I had long conversations with educators that are here with us today that came
Mhm.
from my district. And we talked a lot about parents
Mhm.
and how they don't want to be held accountable
Mhm.
for. What do we do?
Can we get Judge Hurd back up here?
You're saying throw them all in
Right. So
there's
there's another angle that I kind of want to go down with that as well. Not every county is like Tift County. I am in Gwinnett. We are the largest in the state. I think we're still 17th in the nation in terms of school districts. We, the school counselors and school social workers, we work very, very hard, spin our wheels with students that are truant, for the unexcused absences. We send home letters at 5 days, 7 days, and 10 days. We have our SARC, our Student Attendance Review Committee meetings at 10 days, or right after 10 days. After that point, if there is still noncompliance and they are still not coming to school, then maybe we can refer to DFACs. We had other committees that were referred to similar to CHINS, but not CHINS. And last year or 2 years ago, I had a student who was in 6th grade, and he had chronic attendance issues all throughout elementary school. 6th grade, he came to school the first semester 32 days. The second semester, he came 2 days. We referred to DFACs in January, and then we referred to juvenile court at the end of January, maybe beginning of February. There was no court date scheduled until December of that year. The court date did not happen until January of the next year. It was continued, and they had another court date after we got out of school in May, and this student now had been in 6th grade twice. And the judge had turned it back to the school and said that the school needed to come up with a health management plan with the family. And I understood that because dad was saying, he's sick, he's sick, he's sick. All we had were urgent care notes. We had no diagnosis to go from. So it was very frustrating for us that we worked so hard, and we had multiple meetings, and we had that health management plan meeting. We had 6 staff members attend that meeting. There was no parent, and the student was still not coming to school. We are wasting time having a meeting that is not going to do any good. It did eventually go back into juvenile court, and then they moved out of district. And that was after he started 6th grade for the 3rd time. That is anecdotal. That is an extreme case. But we do not feel that there is any teeth in the legislation that says that this is a compulsory attendance law. And the pressure is on the school to make sure that we continue to do more and more and more. And when the kids are not showing up, how much time do we spend on kids that are not there versus the kids that are there that still really need us? So, and I don't know what that answer is. Is school climate an answer? Yes, absolutely. Is partnering with parents an answer? Absolutely. But we need some more help and some more backing. So 5 days sent to juvenile court. Wow, that's amazing. And if, I think that if that could be a statewide program, maybe that would help us out. Yeah, you're welcome.
You, right, Senator Hickman.
Yeah, just one more
Final
quick thing.
comment.
Many of y'all may have seen this, may have seen this article in Atlanta Journal a few months ago where a teacher in Henry County asked her class, and I forget what grade, if you would keep track of your phone, how many times it pinged or it rang during this class. And at the end of the class, she added it all up. And I think the class added up like 216 or 264 or something like that. It was just unbelievable in that classroom how many times their phone pinged or either rang. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Dr. Diaz, thank
you.
you so much for being with us. We
you.
appreciate you.
Yes, I
Thank you for the
appreciate it. Oh, thank
presentation.
you.
Yes, ma'am. All right. Let's see. Dr. Tanya Ferguson next. And we are we've got just under 1 hour. We've got a hard stop at 5 and we've got 3 more speakers. So if I could ask each of the last 3 to hold it to about 15 minutes, and that'll leave a few minutes for questions if we can. If we can do that, that way we won't cheat the last speaker out of their time, if we
Sure
can
will.
manage it out that way. And thank you for being with us. Please introduce yourself and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you guys for allowing me to be here. I am Dr. Tanya Malone Ferguson. I am the Executive Director of the Truancy Intervention Project Georgia. We're housed here in Fulton County. And I will say I can go short because Judge Hurd answered a lot of stuff and then the counselor talked about a lot of things. But I'll give you a little brief history of the Truancy Intervention Project. So we were founded in 1991 and we were founded by Judge Glenda Hatchett. She was the chief judge of Fulton County Juvenile Court at the time. She was seeing kids coming into court for delinquency issues. She's like, and as she goes through their cases, she's saying they have truancy issues. So how can we, if we could have caught them at the truancy, we could have prevented the delinquency. So that's where we started. She worked with the Atlanta Bar President to get volunteer volunteer attorneys to work with our truancy cases. And those attorneys represented them in court. So they saved Fulton County money, but they also served as a role model mentor. So the idea was, how do we get some people to work with these young people to get them back on the right track? And I will say at that time in 1991, truancy, yes, you're only talking about unexcused absences, but we're talking about young people needing alarm clocks, maybe tennis shoes, stuff like that. Now we fast forward to 2025, it's something totally different. But as I say here, we provide legal representation and advocacy for truancy cases. You know, you guys got the stats around chronic absenteeism in Georgia. You've heard from Dr. McGibbony, you've heard from the Georgia Department of Education, so I don't need to go into all of that. The disparities in chronic absenteeism, I think it's important to show this just in I know you guys have had this information. So what we're seeing, and I think Dr. Diaz had touched on it, you know, we're seeing a lot of kids that are homeless, migrant, disabilities, economically disadvantaged. You're seeing a lot of minorities that are having chronic absenteeism issues. So Tip, what we're seeing, and we all talked about it a little bit, what we're seeing: poverty, trauma, caregiving responsibilities, mental health needs, academically behind, substance abuse, resource gaps, family dynamics, bullying, school climate, unstable housing, and lack of transportation. That's what we're seeing in our cases. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about the number of our cases, but I'll tell you our cases that we are getting the kids that are not in the school building as often. We're getting the kids that have a high number of excused absences combined. So we're getting the kids that the school is saying, hey, we've tried everything and they're not here. So I guess Dr. Diaz's situation of you had that young person that wasn't in school for 32 days. We're getting those kids. But now I will say Fulton County is probably a little bit better with that we would, our cases come in pretty quickly, but this is what we're seeing. And then with school climate, to address, I think Senator Sims talking about school climate, what we see with a lot of our families, and you'll see when I get later in the presentation, a lot of our families, they've had a generational issue with attendance and they didn't feel connected to the school. They didn't feel welcomed. So you are now having that their parents are coming into the school. They don't feel connected. Their kids they're behind. They don't feel connected. So they're like, I don't want to come to school. The schools aren't welcoming them. So what we have, and you heard from Darlene Lynch at Georgia Appleseed talking about the enrollment issues. We have a lot of kids that are being pushed out because they're not that favorable kid. So the school climate thing is a huge issue that we see. How we address the problem, the Truancy Intervention Project in Fulton County, we have our juvenile court program, that's truancy cases that we have, that's working with 12 to 16-year-olds. And we say 16 because if we catch them right at 15.9 before they turn 16, we're working with them. And then we have our early intervention program. And so the early intervention program, it started in 2000. It started with the idea, let's get cases early in the elementary school to try to impact the family there so we can make a direct impact on them to hopefully prevent them from going to court. Those are two types of programs. In 2024, 2025, our cases are relatively low for 2024, 2025. I would say that because pre-COVID, we were getting court cases, we could easily get 200 cases a year. Early intervention about the same. After COVID, you go to virtual, then there's a lot of kids after COVID that just magically fell off rolls. And I say magically because COVID, everybody's at home. Then there were some kids that just never came back to school and enrolled. And then schools were also trying to work with families, trying to address some of the problems. So our numbers seem to be pretty low, but we're getting the cases that are not in school. As you see with the truancy cases, we had 52 truancy cases. And I'm going to talk about CHINs a little bit more later on, but I'll tell you our truancy cases, when they come to TIP, they've gone through the CHINs process that Judge Hurd had talked about, or they haven't gone through the CHINs process, meaning that they saw that this was a severe situation. Let's go ahead and send it on to the court process. And then TIP, we then step in and our attorneys work with the clients and we provide services and resource alongside the court, trying to just create a less punitive aspect for them. The average age we're seeing is 15 years old for truancy cases. So we're getting them older. And the average grade is 8th grade. But I'll tell you, so we have one child now that's 15 that is in the 9th grade, but is on a 5th grade level. So we're like, well, yeah, let's get them in school to do what? So now it's how can TIP support this young person with some academic resources to get them on a track that can really be beneficial for them. I'll talk about it, we're looking at, when we're talking about chronic absenteeism, and I'm sure you guys are looking at addressing this because we're talking about the workforce, we're talking about the future. And so for us, it's how can we help some of our young people just get the basics of their academics, get into a workforce program so we can they can be our future. With the early intervention, we have a lot more cases in those. Early intervention, we're working directly with elementary schools. They send referrals directly to us. And so it's a softer approach in a sense. Here's a case that the school social worker's like, I've talked to the mom, I've called, but I haven't really had a lot of success. So we meet at the school. So the schools feel, it's easier with the referrals. Average number of absences there are 16. We say that we want no more than 10 unexcused absences for early intervention. So we get closer to that. And we don't have the lag time of when a petition is filed or complaint is filed. And our average age is 8 years old and average grade is 2nd grade. Again, the idea behind early intervention is try to catch them early. We all know about the school prisoner pipeline, 3rd grade if you're not reading. So we're trying to catch them early to address all of those pieces with early intervention. And so I'll break down here how we work with juvenile court. And I should stress, like TIP, we're a nonprofit organization. We partner with Fulton County Juvenile Court. We're a court partner in providing resources and support for the truancy cases. We also work with Atlanta and Fulton County schools, with the elementary schools, and trying to address the attendance issues there. But how we work, a referral is made. So the school social worker, they file a complaint with juvenile court for our truancy cases. Then at that time, it goes through our CHINs process. It goes to I shouldn't say CHINs process. It goes to our CHINs units. Our CHINs, Children in Need of Service unit, will then look at the case and sit with the district attorney that works in juvenile court that represents our CHINs truancy cases. We'll sit with her and look at the severity of the cases. Do we think there's some severe mental health? You look at all the stuff that the social worker has done, what all has been put in place, what was successful, and they'll try to determine, do we need to move this on to go ahead and just make this a straight petition to court? or can we work with it? If they determine that, okay, this is a family that we can work with, they'll have them sign a 30-day waiver, meaning in these 30 days, we're going to try to work with you through the Children in Need of Services Unit to give us time if we have to file a petition, because you have to file a petition within 30 days. So they do the 30-day waiver. They work with the CHINS unit. If it's not successful, it moves on to a truancy case. But again, most of the cases that we get are coming directly to us, meaning they come in, the CHINS unit reviews it and says, okay, this is something that it's a little bit more intense and we probably need to have a little more teeth. I think going to Dr. Diaz, talking about how, with parents, all of those things, let's send this straight on to the court, as a court petition. When it comes in through court, we then either have our staff attorney or we assign a volunteer attorney to represent the child in court, and again, give them the guidance, the advocacy, all of those pieces. And then our TIP team, we do an assessment, we really look at, what do we think's going on? So, I think somebody had talked about really looking at the resources and services that need to be put in place. TIP really steps back and like, hey, has the time to talk with the parent, the child, what's going on, what do you like, what do you don't like, why are you missing school, hearing all of those pieces. So, and really connecting the dots. If we really feel like is it a McKinney-Vento issue, meaning, so when they were evicted, that's when attendance issues started. Okay, we're going to try to address that, and how can TIP support and create some housing stability? Or is it that the family was stable and we had chronic attendance issues and then they became evicted? Now they're using the eviction and so how do we, really work and support the family in addressing like what the real issue is? So we do an assessment. We are building our collaborative partners to really work with mental health individuals to provide mental health assessments, to also do some more individual counseling. And I say individual, like some, not just making a referral to a larger organization. We're making a referral to private practice organizations, say, hey, we have little Johnny here these are his needs. Can you really work with him? Do support groups for our young people that are dealing with truancy. And then we create an intervention plan, which I was talking a little bit about that, of how we work and partner with the family and create those personalized attendance plans. And I should say this step here, when we do early intervention, and which I'll talk about, we also do this intervention plan with early intervention cases as well. And then the follow-up. So with court, similar to Judge Heard, our families come back every 2 to 3 months. In that 2 to 3 month time, TIP is always in contact with them. So there's some things in the standard court order that we make sure they comply. Then there's some things that we're doing outside of the court order. So again, we're not trying to be as punitive, but we're trying to really put some support and resources in there to get them on the track that they need to be on so they can be a self-sufficient adult. But we do all the continued follow-up. Our attorneys come back to the court, come to the court hearings with them, do all of that. So there's consistency and all of that there. Now, we do have some young people and some families that just do not comply. And our attorneys and staff is all, here are the consequences of your behavior, and try to explain all of that. And we also will explain to parents with the protective orders, like, what does that mean? And this is what it may look like for you. And so, we say parents may get mad at us when we say we're going to have to ask for you to get a protective order, but we explain, like, because we can't put all the consequences on the child. But our impact, what we see is that when we come in, we help the family feel like they can have an easier communication with staff. Like, we're helping them, you could say we're sort of the mediation between the school and the parent, and helping them feel more comfortable with talking to the school, writing notes, or just, hey, expressing any kind of concerns. Then they feel more informed about their child's attendance. They feel more informed about what does it mean. So you guys talk about chronic absenteeism, how do you address tardies and all that stuff. We talk about all that. And so you're bringing your child to school every day at 8:30, they're missing first period. And for the younger kids, they're missing first period. That's their most critical period. So when you then see, okay, my child's behind on reading, well, that was first period. So we really, they feel they're more informed by the time they come through us. And they rate.
Could you take just a moment and wrap up if that's okay? And thank you.
But what we see, and I'll get to It's a moving. Some of the things that we say, invest in prevention, do more with funding for early intervention and case management programs similar to us. I think to address your question, Senator Steele, when you asked, like our program, it's almost $1 million, but we have a staff attorney, we have myself, we have a family support services manager, and we plan to hire 2 case managers with the intent to hire more. And we have our collaborative partnership. So we have the staff that can manage all of that. The strengthen school-based supports, just strengthen what they have in the school systems, improve data sharing. I think some of the issues that we also have when you have nonprofits in the courts, it sometimes can be difficult with what information shared, how often it's shared, how frequently. So there's delays in information, transportation issues. So, and I know in rural areas, transportation is always going to be an issue because it's not, schools aren't right around the corner, but within Fulton County, Atlanta Public Schools is looking at bus routes, where they are when you're talking about young kids having to cross a busy street. Some parents are like, I'm not going to do it. Or if it's early in the morning and it's a busy street, they're just like, I'm just not. So I'm gonna wait until 10 o'clock. Address root causes, helping identify or provide them more resources for mental health, affordable housing, and family supportive services. So yes, we're in Fulton County. We have a lot of that in the metro area, but we still don't have enough when we're talking about addressing these. And then expanded legal advocacy models. Like I will say TIP has replicated the model around the state, but when you're going into some smaller areas, when you think of volunteer attorneys, they're still having to pull attorneys from other counties, which may make it a little difficult. But as I said before, addressing chronic absenteeism is not only about education, it's about public safety, workforce development, and long-term economic growth. And that's what TIP is here to try to provide the support.
Thank you.
Dr. Ferguson, thank you for that presentation. I appreciate that. We all do. That was very informative. Any quick questions? No questions. Okay. Thank you for being with us, and thanks for sharing your expertise and your experience. Margaret Schweitzer?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So I stayed to my 15 minutes.
Great, thank you. Keeps me from being the bad guy. Let the
Yes.
phone be the bad guy. Thank you.
Okay. Well, good afternoon. There we go. My name is Margaret Schweizer. I'll just quickly introduce myself because I'm not here on behalf of an organization. Really here just to share my expertise and just kind of a brief resume of what I've done. I'm a pro temp judge at Fulton County Juvenile Court, which means I've been appointed to preside over dependency, delinquency, and CHINS matters on an as-needed basis when our presiding full-time judges are busy. I am an executive committee member of the Fulton County Student Attendance and School Climate Committee. Thank you very much, by the way, for SB 123. We're very excited about it. In my materials, I gave you guys the most recent copy of Fulton County's protocol if you guys were interested. I think it's the one that doesn't have signatures, but I can get you the ones with the signatures if you're interested. I spent the majority of my career representing children in foster care in their stated interest, and I'm a child welfare law specialist. So when thinking about what I could add to this conversation, I was very happy to know that Judge Hurd was here to talk about the statutory mechanics of the law, so I don't have to do that. And I was very, very happy that Dr. Ferguson was here, so I didn't have to explain TIP and all of the data. So what I'm trying to add to this conversation is the youth perspective, right? We're all here because of these kids. And usually in law, in policy, in life, I know my 2 kids would definitely say this, their opinions are the last ones that are asked, right? Their perspective is the last one that counts. However, without them, none of us would be here having these conversations. So my hope is to show how the law and data translates to a real life perspective of what these kids and families travel through on a Fulton County kid. So that's who I am. But more importantly, I want to talk about Jasmine. So Jasmine is a composite of the kids that I've worked with and worked for over the decade plus that I've worked in Fulton County Juvenile Court. For the story, she is 13 years old. She goes to Atlanta Public School. She has a younger brother and a single mom. She's never been very successful in school. When she has a hard time understanding something, she has these outbursts, right? These emotional outbursts, which disrupt the whole class. She's in the 7th grade, but reads at a 3rd grade level. She's never been held back. She kind of just got pushed through by making the bare minimum, a story I know you guys are familiar with. There were talks of getting her evaluated for an IEP at the end of last year, but by the time it got to the school social worker's desk, there weren't enough days in the year for the mandatory observation period for her to be eligible for an IEP. At the beginning of this school year, she and her mother and her brother were unfortunately evicted, and they became transient. Now, as a result, she started to miss some school, and her absences started to pile up, especially as her mom had issues transporting her to school, and her family's housing situation became increasingly unstable. They moved from couch to couch, from county to county. And now her mom has an eviction on her record. We already know how difficult it is to secure affordable housing. So Jasmine is asked to watch her brother more and more as her mom looks for a job. Her mom can't find one job that would sustain their life, so now has to have two. Still no childcare, and her mom is on probationary services or probation at work upon just getting a job, meaning she can't miss any days or she's at risk of being fired. When Jasmine does show up at school, she's exhausted. She's dirty. She looks a mess. She's wearing the same clothes she wore the day before and is told to keep her family's business to herself. Her family has had court involvement in the past on a generational level, and this family knows you don't open your mouth and you keep your head down. And this is why McKinney-Vento has not been triggered, or Every Student Succeeds Act has not been triggered, to ensure all the wonderful services and supports that Dr. Diaz talked to you about. So when she goes to school, she appears anxious and depressed and disconnected. Now, we talked about this, so I'm not going to talk about it much, but just to note that chronic absenteeism is really the indicator of the need, and truancy is the legal status, right? So it's a member of what we call CHINs, just like a runaway status is, which essentially criminalizes behavior due to a minority status, right? So due to school compulsory attendance laws, Jasmine at 13 may be committing a status offense if she doesn't go to school. If I ran away from home, hopefully people would be sad, but nobody would put up a pickup warrant, right? The same way they would do if Jasmine at 13 years old ran away. So Dr. Diaz also mentioned the school to prison pipeline. We often talk about this in the context of zero tolerance policies, expulsions, and suspensions. But I think that it would be a missed opportunity to not talk about it in the context of chronic absenteeism and understand how these kids and these families really operate through the systematic constructions that we as a society and you as lawmakers have set up for them. I've yet to meet a child that strictly is dependent or strictly is delinquent or strictly lives in this chin zone. The reality of life is messy, and these kids interact and these issues feed upon themselves. So Jasmine's story is going to show you how these things escalate quickly, and about how the system contacts and cross-system contacts with children and family feed into this pipeline that leads children into the juvenile justice system. So getting back to Jasmine, her absences start to pile up. The school social worker sends the calls, makes the calls, sends the letters to no avail. What they don't know, of course, is that they're no longer at that address, and Jasmine's mom's phone is no longer working. She's had maybe 2 phone numbers since then. Time goes by, and a school resource officer, along with a couple of student attendance support teams, do a home visit. No one answers the door, and a truancy complaint is filed in juvenile court. The family has been almost completely non-responsive. In the meantime, Jasmine goes to school under the influence of marijuana. She's having a very, very hard time coping with everything that is going on. She's getting absolutely no support from the community or her school. She's suspended for 2 days, but doesn't come back for a week. So thinking about our school to prison pipeline, we've got absenteeism, we've got school discipline, we've got disconnection from school, all leading Jasmine down a very slippery slope. So at Fulton County Juvenile Court, court administrators, the schools, districts, social workers, the lawyers, the district attorney's office has worked very hard to come up with a systematic way that truancy complaints are received, processed, and petitions are brought through the court. Just like everybody else you've heard from, it's really important to note that most of the children don't need court intervention, right? What they need is coordinated support, which is taken care of on the left side of this chart. But in Jasmine's case, we're right here where the DA has to decide whether to petition the case to move forward for traditional court involvement or divert it to more social work. And what does the DA have in front of her, right? A family that's almost non-responsive, absentee days that have been adding up like nobody's business. And now the child's been suspended from school, hasn't gone back for over a week, and there may be some substance use issues involved. So the DA petitions for truancy, and while waiting for a court date, things escalate. Jasmine shows up at her school seemingly intoxicated again to pick up her brother. No one can reach the mom, and a CPS referral to the Division of Family and Children's Services is made. Jasmine's mother loses it. She tells Jasmine, you got to get a job. You got to help me. We got to get this together. We have to find some safe and stable housing to get you guys to school, or you're going to end up in foster care. Jasmine's 13. She can't go to Publix and get a job yet, right? Jasmine's friends tell her they know an easy way to make some money and ask for her help to go through a couple of the cars in the school parking lot, in the glove compartments. They find a gun, because that's where guns are, in the glove compartments of these cars. They get found out very quickly. The police arrive, and Jasmine is holding the gun. She is arrested and detained. A school disciplinary meeting is held, and the school kicks her out. They send her to alternative school, and another CPS referral to DFACS is made. So back to our pipeline, right? We've got absenteeism, discipline, disconnection from school, increased law enforcement contact. And now we have some court involvement. And she's also not enrolled in school at this point. So we have a detention hearing 2 days later. The ADA argues for continued detention of Jasmine, as they're very concerned about the dramatic increase and the potential of harm to herself and others. Jasmine's mom couldn't find transportation and was not able to come to court. The ADA argues that Jasmine is not in school, has no stable housing in which to coordinate an ankle monitor, has little familial support, and the mother is not even there to present an appropriate plan for supervision if she has one. The PD requested a recess to get the mom to court. She says, no, the mom is here. She can come. She can talk to you. Court agrees. Jasmine is held for another 2 days. Now, I think it's important to note here that Jasmine not being in school and the increased issue of absenteeism is being used as a justification to keep her detained in juvenile detention. School equates to stability and consistency. And when kids are in school, they are in a safe place all day, presumably out of harm and out of trouble. When kids are not in school, the harm for all of the bad things that can happen when kids are not in school increases, right? And the judges have to make this consideration of whether detention is required to protect the property of others or to secure the child's presence in court. Not being in school, not having a consistent record of school attendance factors into this analysis. Now, detention hearings have to happen within 48 hours of a warrantless arrest pursuant to 151172, but because they're trying to get mom here, they continue the case, right? Well-intentioned system of continuance for good cause results in Jasmine being further detained another 2 days for circumstances completely out of her control. At the next hearing, the court releases Jasmine into the custody of the Division of Family and Children's Services. The mother was unable to attend court, and virtual was not an option. While in emergency foster care, she's separated from her brother. She's not attending school at all. She's not enrolled. She's now missed way too many days to remain in the 7th grade, so she will be held back. And she's being moved from school district to school district while Defects tries to find a placement that will take a teenage girl now with a record of delinquent behavior. So for our pipeline, we have all the things: absenteeism, discipline, disconnection from school, increased law enforcement contact, court involvement, not enrolled into school, and then straight into detention in the juvenile justice system. So I told you the story of Jasmine to start kind of thinking about how fast these things happen, right? And how messy they can be, and how cross-systematic they can be, and how children and families touch upon every chapter and institution we have in this state and in this country, and how they bleed in together. So while there is a truancy process going on, while the school social workers are working on their things, Jasmine is living her life and doing the best she can with all of the circumstances that have led to those chronic absentee issues. So when I started to think about what could have changed in Jasmine's story, right? What could we have done to plug in some of this, to plug up some of this school pipeline stuff? If she had gotten that IEP in the beginning, right, or earlier in that school year, she may have had some due process protections, which would have maybe saved her from being suspended or expelled to begin with. If there was some system coordination for early intervention before we had gotten to this place of even eviction, right? If she was reading at a 3rd grade level and was old enough to be in the 7th grade, these kinds of early interventions should have been in place even before the absenteeism stuff started showing its ugly head. Tiered attendance supports would have been really helpful here. There is an enforcement piece missing of our student attendance and school climate committee protocols. Everyone does a great job of putting everything on paper, but ensuring that it's actually implemented and implemented correctly and for the benefit of these kids, I think is the missing puzzle of that piece. Trauma-informed approaches focused on re-engagement. When Jasmine did show up, nobody tried to re-engage her. Nobody asked, what's going on with you? Nobody tried to offer her things when she showed up dirty or unkempt. Treating absenteeism as a symptom of a struggle and not defiance. You know, if Jasmine was a boy, I think the whole timeline would have been escalated too. A lot of our kids show these behaviors when really they're manifestations of a larger issue that's going on both personally and in their family and in their community. Building opportunity to disrupt this pipeline. What if there was a really cool paid internship that the school could have offered a 13-year-old, right? Maybe through credit recovery. Every time you go, you get paid to go to class. That maybe would have stopped her from breaking into those cars with her friends. Cross-system collaboration. Hopefully you saw the integration of the different systems that are at play here, but you didn't hear me talk about any of them talking to each other, right? Because they don't. Information and data sharing and that collaboration piece amongst these very intense and very underfunded agencies, I think would have helped children like Jasmine. And funding early intervention teams to address these issues on the front side before it becomes in front of Judge Heard. And finally, asking why before what consequence, right? Nobody asked Jasmine what was going on with her. Nobody asked her, why are you missing school? Having those conversations. And that's not the fault of the school social workers or more. These things happen quickly and they compound upon each other, which is why I think having systems in place on the front end will help a lot before we get to detention. So hopefully, as you guys start to think about issues like this and how to combat chronic absenteeism, you think about Jasmine and you think about the kids like her and all of the factors that are interplayed in this very, very complicated system. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Schweitzer, very much for that. Any questions? Very compelling, the way
Thank
you
you.
delivered that. Very compelling. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Dr. Taylor and Dr. Taylor, 2 Dr. Taylors. Are these your people? All right. Thank you for being here.
Thank
I know you've driven some distance since you're from Senator Sims' district.
Yes.
So
Thank you for having us.
it is our pleasure to have you. Thank you. Please introduce yourself and the floor is yours.
I'm Dr. Joanne Taylor, retired assistant superintendent from Doherty County. I've been retired 25 years, so it's been a long time.
And I'm Dr. Merlong Taylor. I'm an assistant principal at Alice Coachman Elementary School in Doherty County.
Okay, great. We're glad to have you.
Thank you. Well, we've heard lots of great information. I was the Amen Corner. And a lot of that being in the elementary school, definitely all of the stories resonate with me on a great deal. But one thing that we're seeing, even though she's retired, she is back because she works tribunal for our school district. And one thing that we've been having lots of conversations about is the vape pandemic that we're seeing right now. And as an elementary school teacher, principal, I would have never thought that I would see vapes in the elementary school. We're 2 months in school and I have about 11 vapes in my office that I've had to confiscate. And I'm trying to figure out also, I'm having to learn to tell if they have THC. Having to ask our SR officers, which one, how do I know if they have THC in them or not? And it's not easy. It's like, oh, we got to Google it. Let's take a picture. They're not easy to detect whether or not they have additional chemicals in them. But at the elementary school level, for every student who vapes, I do have to suspend them. They get the first time is a day. And then, of course, it increases. So they can get up to 10 days for after multiple uses of or bringing the vapes to school. Again, I'm at the elementary school level, so going to tribunal is different for us. It's a larger process. It just takes some time for us to get them there. But again, to ask, how are they getting a hold of these vapes? Just last week, I had some fifth graders report that there were some kids in fourth grade vaping in the bathroom. When we asked the students, why do they like the vapes? They don't even understand what the vapes are per se. They just taste good. If it's flavored mango, they said it tastes like mango, strawberry. And so they're just seeing parents, peers, older siblings have these vape pens. And so they are unfortunately being left to their access. And so they're able to get a hold of them. And that's how they're bringing them into the schools. Because I'm seeing such a rise in this, I've talked to several local pediatricians because I'm like, okay, how do we educate at home? I need the students and I need their parents to know, and what are y'all seeing? Because we're seeing their absence, right? And parents are saying they're sick. And I'm like, well, some of these kids have been vaping. So they're seeing early lung disease in children, COPD. Most of these diseases, of course, we wouldn't see until older adults. When we think about those who are getting exposed to the THC, those other chemicals, we're seeing an increase in mental health in the classes. All the way down to my kindergartners. I do have a school-based clinic. So I have asked our school-based nurse practitioner or our physician assistant, and she's saying they're seeing a lot of correlation now between these vapes and students, how it's affecting them mentally. And also, again, respiratory issues that they're seeing. And so, we know that there needs to be some accountability. But again, we're punishing children for adult issues is how I like to look at it, because how are they getting a hold of these vapes? Again, being at home, and my mother-in-law will talk more about how she's learning that some of the students are getting a hold of the vapes. But again, every time that a child is caught with a vape, they are losing at least 1 to 10 days of school. And that's before they even may per se have to be going to a tribunal hearing. And so then if they go to tribunal, that's even more time that they're out of school. So that pipeline is real. And we're seeing, I'm really serious about how we're going to improve the attendance, how we're going to, eradicate these vaping issues that we're seeing. Again, because not only with the absenteeism, but health concerns that will plague them later in life. So again, like I said, my mother-in-law, she serves on tribunal. And so she's going to see these babies that I have now. Unfortunately, she may see some of them in a couple of years when they make it to middle school and high school. So.
Thank you. Well, I serve on the Student Discipline Tribunal, and we see grades from middle school to high school. In the past year, we have gone from holding tribunal until for maybe 10 or 11 o'clock each day. We have it on Fridays, to holding tribunal as long as 4:30 in the afternoon because of the incidences of vaping. They get into school with vapes they pass through metal detectors, and it will pick it up because it's got a metal stripping around it. Manufacturers have gotten so smart that now the vapes are all plastic. And so the schools are not able to intervene. They're not able to stop them from getting into the schools. Where do they get them from? I asked a 12-year-old last week, where did you get it from? Did you get it from home? He said, no, ma'am. I got it at the corner store. I said, did someone go in to get it for you? No, ma'am. I went in and got it myself. And I think we need to maybe focus on, they can't go in and buy a pack of cigarettes without them asking for proof of their identification for their age. How can they just walk in and buy something that's much more harmful, I think, immediately than cigarettes, and just get it off the counter and walk out? We've seen, let me back up and say, when they're caught with a vape in school, they're suspended 10 days pending tribunal, which means they're missing 10 days of academic instruction, and it is unexcused because they caused it themselves through their behavior. And when they come before us, if it's their first time, by school board policy, we have to send them to the alternative school for one successful semester. So if they go to the alternative school and they don't do well, they have to stay there until they succeed. And many of them are of age that they just say, I'm not going to alternative school. So you end up having a dropout. It's just a vicious cycle that we're seeing, and we're seeing more and more and more of it. I was talking to my daughter-in-law last night, and she said, you know, some of these babies are coming to school in cars where when they open the door to let them out, you smell the marijuana, you know. So the child comes to school already under the influence in the homes. I've had my SRO officers to go out to tell them that they're headed for tribunal. And he says, when I open the door, I just get an automatic contact high from the house. So it's the environment that these kids are living in. And it's just a vicious, vicious cycle. I don't know what we can do about it. I think the laws need to be stricter on allowing children to just walk into a curb store and buy one. And I don't know if we keep putting kids out of school without somehow or another researching the root cause of this problem, the home or the environment that they're in, then we're not doing justice to the kids. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Any questions, comments? Yes, sir. Chairman?
Yeah, thank y'all for being here. You can't imagine how many times this summer I've thought about vaping. Not personally, please. But I am so sick of riding by these stores
Yes.
that have all these flashing purple lights
Yes.
on and all this kind of attractiveness, knowing that I don't really know what all is going on in there.
Right.
So what y'all telling today is very important to me. And I think, I don't know anything about it. I've never been around it, never seen it, but I do know in talking to people, it's a real issue. And I appreciate you so much for bringing it to our attention today.
And I add too that some of the vapes are more potent than others. Our SRO officers take and field test it, and some of them have 97.5% marijuana, and some maybe have 25%. So they can go in and ask for that 97.5% marijuana vape and get it.
Yeah.
At 10 and 11 and 8 and whatever age they go in the store.
Wow.
Yeah, I've seen some stores when you brought that up about the lights.
Uh-huh.
My daughter accidentally went into one. She's 15 because they also said that they sold beauty supply products. And so she told a family friend, she was like, oh, there's a beauty supply store over by Hibbett's. And so when they called, they said, no, that was a smoke store. But they had on their sign
Beauty
that they carried beauty supply products as well.
tricking them. They tricking them.
Mm. Yes, sir. Senator Still.
Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, sir.
You'd mentioned that you've already confiscated 11 this year in
Yes.
elementary school. What's the youngest student that?
8 or 9. This is the youngest has been. Yes. Now I have had a kindergartner with lighters, but I don't believe I had a kindergartner with a vape. You think?
Wow.
No.
What's that increase over last year? Did you have any last year?
I wasn't at this school last year. My previous school, there were a few vapes. I can't give you a number, but because I.
It's on the rise. You would.
Oh, yes. So our district is, like you said, they're putting vape detectors in the middle and high school. And I keep yelling and saying, hey, it's over here too. What I've learned is that in some of the schools that the children are taking out their deodorant, putting the vape in the deodorant container, putting the deodorant back on there, and then putting it so they're able to get
We
through.
have all kinds of ways of getting it into the school.
Yeah.
Girls will put it in their bra and say when the metal detector goes off,
It's the
oh,
wire.
my bra is underwired, you
Right.
know. So it's just
Yeah.
so many different ways
Yeah.
of getting it in.
Yeah.
Dr. Taylor and Dr. Taylor, thank you for being here. There's just no substitute for a boots on the ground perspective to
Yes.
inform us who don't have that and won't, but for your willingness to come here and share that with us. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
All right. All right. And by the way, you hang out with good company too.
My best
Oh,
friend.
Yes. Okay, dare I say, another successful committee meeting of great witnesses and great folks. I want to give a nod to Kaylee Bell, who has worked very hard to put the schedule together, and Oswald in our office have worked to really bring us the people that we need to hear from in a structured way going forward. Kaylee, when is our next meeting set? Thursday, November the 20th will be our next meeting for this committee. And thanks also to everyone else that you see up front, the staff that help us put this together, whether it's from the IT standpoint or all the other folks in our great Senate side that allow us to come and be productive when it comes time to start a committee. So with that, any final comments from the committee members? Okay, if not, I wish everyone a safe travel. Thank you again for being here, and we'll stand adjourned.